it's not that the basic question was how to unleash the potential what we have in the domestic market in our country. So we have the resource, and the assessment what he has shared is comparatively higher than what it used to be earlier, and then by December 2019, as you mentioned, it's likely to go further up. And there is a potential of shale and the CBM, which we need to monetize. But I understand the new policy which is coming is covering all these three together, so there is no differentiation, which will be definitely a move in the right directions. But some of the points made by all these speakers here, I'll start with Joshiji with you, is that question is, there is a lack of confidence in the investor, particularly in all the infrastructure projects, that's what you mentioned in the beginning. And you are not very hopeful that this current oil price is going to may not last long. And that's a question which probably nobody has the answer today. But the other important point that looking into the current landscape and economy and the political system what we have in the country, are we politically and economically prepared to have a regulatory environment? Your answer to that was probably no. The question is then the pricing of gas, the observation that is that Mr. Bora also mentioned, Mr. Sharma also mentioned, and all of you have been saying that the current price, what we are having, especially for the nominated block, $3, doesn't give you any kind of support to your investments in the upstream. So the option is that you should move towards the market price, and that's the right way to do it. But whether the market price, linking it with the LNG, is the market price or it is a different market mechanism, is an issue which we need to debate. Because in this panel, to be fair, at the end of the day, money is going to come from the consumer, and nobody is there in this panel from the consumer side. But let me give you the consumer perspective. The point here is, today when you talk to major consumer of gas is power. We know the power prices are 2.5 rupees, and the exchange and the solar power, the way it is coming. Then you talk about steel, then steel say that if you want us to be competitive, we want below $6 kind of a gas delivered to them. There are a few sectors where they can afford the textile, the ceramics, another industry who are using and replacing the liquid fuel. So that's the ground reality which we need to keep in mind. But I think whatever way we speak, there are pros and cons on both the sides. The market price may be the right mechanism to bring out what is that balance between the producer and the market, is the right answer to move in these directions. Mr. Bora spoke about the technology adoptions and technology induction in the company, the flexibility and the autonomy which they need in their public procurement process is an issue, and this needs to be addressed. But the other important point you mentioned about the potential in Northeast, which is probably needs to be unleashed, and the minister has mentioned in the morning that now the things are being planned for the connectivity of Northeast with the LPG pipeline, with the gas pipeline. Probably then will find the market at that moment of time, but that will require a huge investment. In our sector, when we talk whether E&P, whether upstream, midstream, downstream, across the whole value chain, the oil and gas is a highly capital intensive industry, whatever side you talk about. So that's an issue which bothers everybody. Mr. Goenka mentioned about the freedom from multi-layer of scrutiny. Once you have a PSC, then you leave it to them within the contour of the PSC where you have multi-layer. And of course, there are different views of what the government takes on the produce. But the other important point which was mentioned by Sharmani on about the performance of the national oil company who has to play a major role is an issue of governance which you mentioned about, and the freedom and autonomy, Mr. Sharma, you also talked about, needs to be given in true sense. You gave example of Saudi Aramco. The other good example is the Petronas. And of course, Gazprom and may not be that may a very absolutely comparative name is because of a different region, but I would name Petronas as another good example along with the Saudi Aramco. So what the observation are that we need an institutional mechanism to have a connection between the owner and the CEO of the management of the company. We need a proper institutional mechanism which gives them true autonomy to function. Dr. Paliwal, you mentioned about a very important point I like to emphasize that is that all said and done, and my experience also is that last so many years being in the board for last 11 years, I have been participating in various conferences in ministry, government, private, everywhere. whatever you do, government has to be centric to the energy. And this is not only true to our country, it is true to every country in the world, and it is true to the globe. And even in the market like US, which is absolutely free market, the government is centric to some of these key decisions as far as the energy is concerned. So therefore, the government has to be there at the center, and we as an industry has to take into account the government aspirations, the government views into that. It's a question of how do we bridge the gap between us and the government to really make them understand. The other point which you mentioned about the drilling intensity we need to increase. The challenge here is that how do you bring in more money, how do you drill more? That's the question which we have been debating, and whether you have a confidence of putting more money and drilling more well in the current situation and the current issues which are in front of us. The other important aspect was about the big data and analytics. Probably this is the time where the industry needs to take a look at it, how you can adopt these technology, the modern technology, which can help us to really get best out of this. The last, I would like to sum up that all said and done, these issues are not the first time we are discussing. In fact, I have been participating in various conferences, and sometimes it becomes a repetition and a monologue for us to discuss in this kind of conference. My view and take is that until unless we are able to sell this politically, probably the economics can follow that. But until unless we do that, probably we will not be able to achieve. And this gap, when we sit here and talk about the policy, fiscal regime, tax regime, the confidence, all those things, is largely flowing out of the government and flowing out of the regulator, the structure of the regulator, the support of the regulator, the mindset and the orientation of the regulator and the government is very important. And as an industry, we need to really understand the outlook of society towards the hydrocarbon sector is changing. Other day, some of the industry delegation was there with me and from one of the other chambers. And they mentioned that the way industry looks at you today is you are one of the major pollutant in the environment today. The hydrocarbon industry, that's the way they were trying to paint the picture. And I responded to them that 10 years back, all top 5 companies in the world were the oil company, today they are technology company. And still, and as Mr. Taneja said, whatever you say, at least for our country for 30-40 years, this industry has to play a major role. So therefore, public perception also needs to be changed, and that will happen when we really engage with the political mass. And I remember some time back we started an exercise of how do we do the awareness with the young politicians to make them understand the problems, and so that once you convince them, then probably the other things will fall in line. The other important aspect is the balance between the upstream players' expectation and the last mile consumers. Is a very important figure because the main challenge comes there. The price of gas, even domestic customer has paid even as high as $4.50, and there was no cry. Today when the price goes from $2.50 to $3, they start crying. So it's a question is how do you strike that balance? Therefore, I think the market price, the hub is the answer for that. But will it happen immediately? Will it take some more time? It's a collective and concerted effort is required to be taken in this direction, which is what the another major reform the government is trying to do. And the other important point to me as I look at the whole landscape of the hydrocarbon sector, the PSU has to play a major role, especially upstream PSU. So therefore, what you talk about, the autonomy, the how to make them more vibrant is the answer for that. Until they themselves feel confident, the private investor will also not feel confident. Until PSU feel confident, the private investor will follow them. That's what is my assessment. I think with this, the answer to these questions will be probably we as an industry need to continue to engage. The Ficci Hydrocarbon Committee or the setup needs to play a more proactive role to engage with the political establishment first. My view is that we have done enough such conferences. Until we are able to convince this politically, we will not be able to move far. That's what is the sum and substance of these issues. So thank you very much, I think, and on behalf of, you want to say something?
Yeah, just the last point you mentioned about the engagement with the political class of politicians to engage, so that we can realize that, they are also actually a very important stakeholder, but the most important stakeholder. I think the consumer is is probably the way in order to get there. If you see, for instance, 4 years ago, whenever we increase the price of petrol, diesel, most people would ask some questions, some people would protest, but people didn't know much about how basically you reach to that price, or what is the kind of economics and politics behind that. Today, actually people know, thanks to media. Because people know, now they say, oh, why are you being, for instance, we are asked to pay 100% tax and excise and VAT and all that. So I think in terms of the public opinion is getting educated when it comes to the hydrocarbon sector. And in the process, I think it's very important that we engage with the politician and say, look, you also need to know a little bit more about these things. So I think my personal experience is if you engage in a systematic manner and you persevere and you are a little patient, engagement with politicians actually is not that difficult.